Y usted no le dijo a Salvador en ningún caso que le mataran.
Jamás, nunca.
¿Pudo él entender que usted sí
No,
quería esa
nunca
muerte?
hablamos de eso de Antonio, hablaba de mis problemas con él, de mi matrimonio, pero yo nunca he pedido que haga eso. Nunca.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Today, we're going to be talking about a really tragic case widely known across Spain. It's about what happened to 36-year-old Antonio Navarro Cerdán and how far someone will go to be with their lover. Well, in this case, lovers. As I was reading into this, I was just so shocked at how crazy this person was, how many lies they told, how many people they manipulated. It is just truly frightful, and anytime someone commits murder to avoid getting a divorce, it's just so disappointing. How dare you take someone's life away just to avoid a breakup? I swear this video is going to make you so mad. I was so upset while researching it and filming it. There is quite a bit of information to go through, and before we get into it, hopefully you guys can take a moment to hit the subscribe button down below. It would be amazing if you guys could join us and, be part of the familia. I will also have my second channel linked down below, as well as my TikTok, my Instagram, just all of my social media. So if you guys ever want to just see like summaries of my videos and just like shorter posts, that is always on my TikTok and on my Instagram. Anyways, with that, let's jump right in and let's talk about this just insane case. Antonio Navarro Cerdán was born to his parents Mercedes and Vicente on June 12, 1981 in Novelda, Alicante, Spain. He also had one brother named Vicente, just like their dad. Antonio's friends describe him as being very funny and outgoing with just always a big smile. He had a lot of friends in his hometown and was just like a very pleasant person to be around. He was also very hardworking and ambitious, and he knew he wanted to work hard in life and just make a good living. In 2011, when Antonio was 30, he met 21-year-old Maria Jesus Moreno Canto through her brother Victor, who he happened to share some common classes in college with, so they were quite good friends. So, who was Maria? Or better known as Maje, which is a nickname that she asked people to call her. Maje was born on September 6, 1990 in Novelda, Spain, to her mother Maria and to her father Antonio. Maje is the second youngest of 5 children, so she has a brother named Antonio, a brother named Victor, a sister named Natalia, and then another brother named David. And they were a very religious family. All the children attended the Santa Maria Magdalena school run by nuns, which had separate classes for boys and girls. Maje said that her parents were very strict, and one time her dad actually saw her draw a heart in her notebook, and he took her away from all the other siblings in front of them and forced her to erase the heart with her finger. Maje and her siblings rarely went to their friends' birthday parties or any type of social outings, and they basically spent all of their time at home only with each other. If they were away from home, it was during summers at religious camps. So as a result, because of this, because they were so tightly kept at home and just with each other, Maje had little to no interaction with boys in a natural setting until she was older. According to people who knew her, she later became quite vain and flirty. So during the summer, she started working at her parents' plumbing supplies shop in the afternoon. And as she was getting older, she would flirt with customers, and people just saw her kind of step out of her shell more. However, Maje wanted to do more in her life. She wanted to see more. She wanted to meet more people and just kind of burst out of this religious and strict bubble, which she was used to. Which brings us to when she was 21 years old and studying nursing in Barcelona. She gained a sense of independence and was enjoying the freedom and seeing the world outside of her hometown and family's religious beliefs. It was here where she met Antonio, who was 9 years older than her. Antonio was studying engineering at a different university than her, but like I mentioned, he was studying at the same university as her brother, and he would occasionally go visit her brother at their home, and it was during one of these visits that Antonio noticed Maje. So the two began to date, but 3 years later, in 2014, they actually broke up over a financial disagreement. Maje had asked Antonio for 80,000 euros to renovate her grandparents' house, which he initially was going to give her, but was later swayed otherwise by his family. And this ended up being the reason that they broke up. Antonio's family was somewhat relieved because they were really not fond of Maje. They just had a very bad impression of her and thought that Antonio deserved someone better. So Antonio went on to move to Requeña for a new job, while Maje got a nursing position at a religious elderly care home in Valencia. Sometime later, Maje reconnected with Antonio and convinced him to get back together. They began dating, and Antonio thought things were going really well between them. He got back with her despite his family telling him to think about it more, but he told him that he just loved loved her so much and just wanted things to work with her. However, Antonio had no idea that Maje was actually being unfaithful to him. In September of 2015, Maje began having an affair with a man she met at her new hospital job. This man was 44-year-old Salvador Rodrigo La Piedra. He was born on October 3rd, 1970, so he was 20 years older than Maje, which is quite a large age gap. And Salvador was actually married. Yeah, he was married with a woman who also worked at that same hospital, and they even had a daughter in her 20s together. But that didn't stop either Maje or Salvador from having an affair. They began having sexual relations and began writing love letters to each other apart from messaging on Telegram to avoid Maje's husband from finding their conversations. One letter from Maje reads, quote, "With this short letter, I want to tell you that I love you, that I need you, and that I'm going to take care of you and pamper you. I am yours and I promise to be faithful to you because there is nothing but a man like you by my side. Keep fighting, keep conquering. There is never a lost battle at your side. You have at your side a woman who values you, who loves you and listens to you. A big kiss for the best daddy in the world. I love you." Like, huh? Like, what? What is this letter? How is she telling her lover that she is going to be faithful to him when she's literally in a relationship with someone else? Like, just so delusional. Salvador was just like utterly in love with Maje though. He was so happy that this beautiful young woman even looked in his direction. He fell really hard for her. His response to that letter reads, quote, "Dear Maje, this letter responds to your wonderful gift, to the wonderful letter that you wrote me with so much love. It gave me so many feelings that I'm still internalizing them. You make me feel very loved and valued. I want you to know that my love for you is so great that I want you to be happy by my side. I know that what we have is different. I wish I could give you everything you need. I would like to spend the rest of my life with you. Always choose who you love." Now, Salvador even brought up leaving his own family, like leaving his wife and his daughter to be with her, something he said that he actually wanted to do for quite some time. But Maje told him that he didn't need to do that for her. Regardless, Salvador thought that one day he would be Maje, and with Maje alone. He was all in on this relationship. Now, he did know that, of course, she was in another relationship with Antonio, but again, he had hopes that one day it would just be the two of them. So while Maje was hiding this affair from Antonio, Antonio actually proposed to her, and she said yes. They were set to be married in late 2016, and Maje told her lover, Salvador, that marrying Antonio wouldn't affect their relationship and that she was only doing this because her family was pressuring her to. And in response to this, Salvador said, quote, "This is the most painful moment of my life, but you are going to have me there by your side whenever you need me, supporting you, listening to you. Always yours." While Antonio was excited for this wedding and his future with Maje, Maje was having another affair. Yeah, she wasn't just having an affair with Salvador. She was having a second affair. She met a physiotherapist named Tomas Ramos Romero around May of 2016 and began having intimate relations with him as well until the near end of 2017. Salvador did know about Tomas as well, but he thought it was just like a one-night fling between the two and that he was Maje's only serious partner. I mean, besides her fiance Antonio. This is just crazy. Like, this girl was having two affairs and an engagement at the same time, and then one of her lovers knew that, of course, she was engaged to someone else and then had another affair and still didn't really care. So somehow Maje was balancing all of this until eventually this lover bubble popped in mid-2016 when Antonio ended up finding romantic and intimate messages on Maje's cell phone. Messages where Tomas was dedicating a song to her and Antonio broke off their engagement. He put Maje's bags and all of her belongings at the door and ended everything. Tomas was actually the one to pick Maje up after that argument, and she ended up staying with him for a couple of days. And it was also around this time that Maje began yet another intimate relationship with another coworker named Manuel. Yes, she now had basically 3 lovers. They began talking over their current romantic relationship status since they had both just been broken up with and began seeing each other more and more. The two ended up having a relationship for a little bit over a year. So again, just to recap, because I know there's a lot of names and a lot of men in this, Antonio broke up with Maje and she was still seeing Salvador, Tomas, and now Manuel. Apparently, Salvador only knew about Tomas, not about Manuel. And both Tomas and Manuel didn't know about each other. So again, this was just like a big mess. Now, somehow, despite all of this, Maje ended up later convincing Antonio to get back together with her and convinced him to continue with their wedding plans. I'm not sure how she was able to do it, but somehow she was able to convince him and they got back together. So now she had 4 men in her life. In June of 2016, Maje and Antonio actually decided to buy a flat at 18 Calomoca Street in Valencia in the Patrais neighborhood for 107,000 euros. Antonio paid for 80% of the cost and Maje paid for 20% as stated in the property deed. They also bought a parking space, number 29, on the 3rd underground floor of the same building. Now this is important because it's like apparently really hard to find parking in that neighborhood. So to get a parking spot, like to buy a parking space, was super important. It's like it wasn't a common thing to do. So they were just very proud of themselves. They had their new flat, they had their parking space, and their wedding date was quickly approaching. Maje told her lover Salvador, and only Salvador, that they needed to take a pause on their affair so that she could get married, and Salvador was okay with that. As for her other lover, Tomás, she continued seeing him. She actually went to his family's apartment with him and his parents near the beach the weekend before her wedding, so she was literally having like a little getaway with her lover before she was supposed to marry Antonio and be his wife. She told Tomás that she was marrying Antonio because he had cancer and that she was basically forced to stay with him and take care of him and that she couldn't leave him alone because her family was forcing her to be with him because he was sick. Tomás honestly believed this. He really did believe that Antonio was very sick with cancer and thought that he was going to eventually end up being with Maje after Antonio died from cancer. So he was okay going along with this. Like he was okay, being with Maje knowing that she was literally about to get married. On September 3rd, 2016, Maje and Antonio got married. They looked really happy in the photographs and they went on their honeymoon in Cancun. When they resumed their normal life, after the wedding and after the honeymoon, Antonio would frequently visit his family in their hometown Novelda, but Maje rarely did. She didn't like going back there. She didn't really like spending time with Antonio's family. Instead, Maje resumed her affair with Salvador, Tomás, and Manuel. Tomás said that after the wedding, they were seeing each other almost 3 times a week. Now, since Maje worked as a nurse, she would use the night shifts as like a frequent excuse to spend the nights elsewhere with her lovers or to meet new ones, because in May of 2017, during an outing with her best friend from childhood named Rocio, Maje met another man who she began having an affair with up until January of 2018. This affair was one that she really wanted. This man was a publicist named Jose Antonio Valero Parra, and unlike the others, she kept her marriage a secret from him. She didn't want that to scare him off. She really liked him. Now, Jose claims that he never knew that she was married, that she had all these other boyfriends or anything like that. He says that he truly thought that Maje was just like a regular single girl. Now, Maje ended up really falling in love with Jose and would always make up excuses as to why they couldn't hang out at her house, telling him that she lived with friends who didn't accept male visitors. Of course, this was a lie. I mean, she couldn't bring Jose to her house because she was literally married to Antonio. Regardless, things between them got more serious as time went by. Maje would go to his house after work various times during the week, and their relationship was growing more intimate and just more romantic. I mean, who knows how she had time to be with all of these lovers? At this point, she literally had 4 lovers and was married to Antonio. It's insane and just so wrong what she was doing. She just wasn't even thinking about how all of this could hurt Antonio and just hurt other people. The following month after meeting her new lover, Jose, Antonio actually found a message on Maje's phone where she arranged for her friend to be her alibi, saying that she would tell Antonio that she'd be working with her one night. Antonio sees this and is like, what is this? Why are you telling your friend to give you an alibi? And they got into a big argument because of this. Maje said that she only lied about working that night because she really wanted to go out with friends, but thought that Antonio wouldn't let her. In reality, she was gonna go see her lover, Jose, the publicist. Now, after their big fight, Maje ended up spending the rest of the month with Jose, so it seems like she kind of moved out of her apartment for a bit, gave Antonio some space, and eventually Antonio ended up forgiving her. However, Maje was completely done with her marriage to Antonio at this point, but she couldn't just divorce him. She couldn't risk being left with nothing. She had a good and stable life with Antonio. He had a very good job and provided for her, so she just couldn't let all that be taken away from her. So she began thinking of a way where she could get everything, a way where she could get Antonio out of her life for good, a way where she would be left with Antonio's life insurance policies, their shared apartment, their parking space in the garage, and with a widow's monthly pension. The only way to get all of that was to kill Antonio. So Maje began plotting. Tomas was the first person Maje began speaking to about ending Antonio's life. She would tell Tomas that her husband suffocated her, that he was jealous all the time, was always asking of her whereabouts, and just always wanted to control her. She told Tomas that she wanted to leave Valencia, and Tomas told her, quote, "If you leave Valencia, we leave together. I want you to lean on me." And Maje just continued complaining about Antonio's supposed toxic behavior and how badly she was thinking about ending her own life. Tomas told her via text, quote, "Don't say that ever over a miserable, disgusting man. You can't think like that. I swear, I'll kill him. Have you ever thought about reporting him? If you feel like that, imagine how I feel. I hope he dies. Right now, I'm capable of doing anything." And to this, Maje answered with, "I've thought about ending his life." Maje was testing how far her lover was willing to go for her. And although Tomas didn't take any actual action after hearing her complaints, and even told her that Antonio wasn't worth ruining her life over, that it wasn't worth killing him, her other lover, Salvador, did. In early July, during a romantic dinner with Salvador at a second ranch home he had in Ribarroja, Maje opened up to Salvador. She told him how Antonio had been psychologically tormenting her, constantly suffocating her with jealousy, questioning her every move, and just trying to control every part of her life. She was so frustrated, and at that moment, she asked Salvador as a test, "Would you do anything for me?" And without a second thought, Salvador told her, of course. Maje told him that she wanted Antonio dead, and that is when their plotting began. Just days after this conversation between them, a traffic accident actually took the lives of two of Antonio's colleagues, and both Salvador and Maje said that they wished it had been Antonio in that car instead because it would have just made all of this easier. They then started talking about how Antonio had to disappear. Salvador was like, "Well, I'm supposed to go on vacation soon," and Maje was like, "Well, I'm supposed to also go on vacation. I'm literally going on vacation with Antonio in September, and I don't want to go on that trip with him, so this needs to happen as soon as possible. Perhaps when you come back from your vacation in August." Now, again, it referring to the murder of her husband, which is just insane. She's basically saying, go have fun on your vacation, go live your life, but when you come back, you're killing my husband. So by the end of July, Salvador made the decision of how he would end Antonio's life and save Maje. It had to be in the parking garage where Antonio kept his work car, and it had to be when Maje worked her night shifts. The parking garage was the perfect spot. It had no cameras and would likely be alone. Maje told him that the car in the spot next to theirs was rarely used, so there was very low risk of someone seeing him. So Maje gave Salvador a spare set of keys she had, and Salvador basically was like, "All right, I'll attack Antonio by surprise as he's walking to his car once he gets inside the parking garage, and I'll kill him. Then I'll change my status on WhatsApp to let you know that it's been done without having to speak directly about it to avoid any risk of getting caught." And that was that. The plan was made. After this, they would be able to be together forever. Salvador went on his vacation with his wife and with his daughter, and he later said that he felt really nervous in the days counting down to the murder. He even told Maje that he didn't want to kill a man that he's never even met before, a man that he didn't know, that he loved Maje so much, but that this was just too much to ask of him. So he was definitely having second thoughts about this. He even said that he felt a relief when Maje told him a couple of times that they would have to reschedule the murder because Antonio was parking his car out on the street instead of parking it inside the garage. Maje was usually the one who parked her car in the garage, and Antonio would park in the street. So she was like, it's going to take a little bit of convincing to make him park inside the garage. So she kept pushing it back, and Salvador was like, "Oh my gosh, thank God. This is just one more day where I don't have to commit murder." So they pushed it back a couple of times, but eventually she was able to convince Antonio to park in the garage, and the plan was back on. Maje told Salvador Antonio would be parking his car in the garage on August 16th, 2017. So that was going to be the day. Maje made sure to reiterate to Salvador to not mess this up. Salvador went to go buy a 15-centimeter knife and said that he could not sleep at all the night before. He was just so nervous. Maje, on the other hand, spent the night before the murder with her other lover, Jose, the publicist. She even found time during this murder plot to make empanadas. She even left some of these empanadas for Antonio with a note saying that it was made with, quote, love. And she also wrote that she would be at the hospital for her night shift. Like, this girl was really just making empanadas for him, knowing that he was about to die. Again, she left in her note that she was going to be at the night shift at the hospital, but that was a lie. In reality, Maje was going to be at Jose's house, and of course, Salvador didn't know about this. He had no idea that this woman that he loved so much that he was actually going to commit murder for was with another lover the night before. The morning of August 16th, 2017 came. Maje told Salvador which space was Antonio's, told him his license plate number, and told him that Antonio would be walking into the garage at around 7:30, 7:45 in the morning because he needed to be at work by 8:30 a.m. So Salvador headed to the parking garage on his motorcycle to commit this act that he thought would make Maje his forever. Salvador hid between the other parked cars in the garage, and when Antonio walked in, Salvador attacked him by surprise and stabbed him 6 times in the chest. Then he fled, and he got rid of his bloody clothing, his gloves, and his knife in a septic tank at his second ranch house. And then he went back to his actual home where his wife and his daughter was. He made his daughter food, ate with her, and then changed his status on WhatsApp, just like he said he would when it was all over, to signal to Maje that it was done. Then he got a call from Maje. She asked to go see him in person. So Salvador then went to go see Maje, who he thought was barely come out of her night shift, when again in reality she was barely coming out of spending the night with her other lover, Jose. The two met at Maje's sister's house, Natalia, who wasn't there at that time of day, and they both kind of just talked to each other in person. They agreed to not speak to each other for a while, like to kind of avoid each other, to avoid any suspicions or risking police looking into them. Now, Maje knew that she had to get herself ready to play the role of a mourning widow. Later that day at around 3-4 p.m., a man reported a body in the parking garage. Antonio was found lying face down in the parking garage between the front of his car and the wall. He was lying in a pool of his own blood. When police arrived, they saw that he had 6 stab wounds all to his chest. He was caught 100% off guard with no chance to even try to defend himself. Police realized that his wallet, his IDs, his credit cards, his cash, even his 2 cell phones were still on him. Immediately, police knew that this was personal. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was a personal attack on Antonio. His autopsy revealed that his death was violent, that the cause of death was cardiac rupture caused by a knife wound, that the attack occurred when Antonio was standing facing his attacker. His time of death can be established to be between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m. Police also found no signs of forced entry to the garage door that was always locked, that could only be opened with a key. As for Maje, she got home later that day and she saw all the cops and everything, and she broke down. The paramedics and the ambulances on the scene had to actually calm her down and give her some medication, and she was just in shock and crying and messaging Antonio being like, "Where are you? This is a lie. They said that you're dead." She was just going on and was just in so much disbelief. Afterwards, Maje called Manuel to comfort her other lover that she worked with. He said, quote, "When I arrived, she was crying, frustrated, she had snot in her nose, her hair was messy, she was really affected. She didn't stop hugging me and would hold me tight." As for her other lover, Tomas, Maje spoke with him later that same day that Antonio was killed. According to Tomas, Maje didn't tell him her husband had died right away, but he actually spoke with her on the phone a few days before Antonio's death, and she actually told him that Antonio was rushed to the hospital and that he was basically on his last days and that he was basically going to die any day now. Now, again, Tomas thought that Antonio had cancer, so he assumed that he was in the hospital in regards to his illness. Later that same day that Antonio was found at around 10 p.m., Tomas spoke again with Maje, and that is when she told him that Antonio had been murdered in their parking garage. He also said that Maje asked him to not tell police about Antonio's cancer if police brought him in for questioning, which I feel like should have been a red flag for him, because why can't he mention that Antonio had cancer? As for her other lover, Jose, he said that Maje called him a few days later and confessed that she was actually married and that her husband had just been violently murdered. Jose said that he was upset at the fact that she hid her marriage from him, but ultimately forgave her and they continued with their relationship. This is just crazy. Her husband dies and she's just calling all of her lovers to let them know. I'm assuming it's because this was going to be on the news and she was probably going to be on the news. So she just wanted to warn all of her lovers ahead of time, listen, you might see me on the news crying about my husband, but don't worry, I still love you. you. So days after his death, Antonio was taken to his hometown Novelda to be laid to rest. It was such a hard day for his family and for all of his close ones. They had no idea what happened, who did this, why someone would attack him or anything. They knew that Antonio had no debts, no one he was fighting with, no addictions, no infidelities, nothing. So why would someone want to get revenge on him and just personally attack him? The family was just heartbroken. I mean, they never got the chance to say goodbye to Antonio or just hug him one final time. This was just so unexpected. And Antonio's loved ones even felt terrible for Maje, who was now a widow at such a young age. Everyone at the funeral expressed their sympathy for her, for losing her husband, and they just all felt so bad for her. Maje read a very heartfelt letter at the funeral, which brought so many people to tears. Everyone saw it as just like a terrible tragedy and felt so sorry for her. Antonio's mother, Mercedes, recalled her last conversation with her son. She said that they last spoke the night before his death at around 10 p.m. Antonio had told his mom that Maje had a late shift at the hospital, which is why he parked his car in the parking garage, something that again he rarely did, and that was basically the last conversation that Antonio's mom had with him. Antonio's family recalled that the weekend before his death, he and Maje went to the family's home in Novelda and that they appeared happy. They were on the couch kissing and giving each other hugs and stuff like that. Like, they didn't witness any arguments between them or anything. Antonio just looked genuinely happy. Of course, when police began investigating Antonio's death, they began with the people closest to him, which includes Maje. Head of Homicide Investigations, Esther, said that all of the investigators noticed something off with Maje when she was taken in for questioning. When she was being questioned, she would appear sad and crying and just like looked really upset. But as soon as she was left alone, she would begin texting and like using her phone and laughing at messages. And again, when questioning resumed, she would switch to being all sad and mopey. So police were like, this is weird. It seems like she's just like putting on a facade. She also told police some things that really made them think something was off. She told them that maybe Antonio walked into the parking garage at the same moment that someone was trying to rob a car and confronted this person, which then resulted in him being attacked and killed. She said that Antonio was hot-headed and just was one of the type of people to step up in situations like that, which really didn't coincide with what Antonio's best friend said about him. They told police that Antonio hated conflict and didn't like confrontation and things like that, and that they knew that he and Maje had some issues in the past because Maje herself could be quite controlling and toxic, even laying a hand on Antonio before. They recalled how Antonio had been like really distant from them since dating and marrying Maje. They told police about an incident that happened in the summer of 2013 where they all took a trip with their respective girlfriends, and on this trip, Maje was dancing and flirting with other men in front of Antonio and in front of his friends. His friends also told police that in late 2014, the day before Maje's brother's wedding, Antonio told them that he actually wasn't going to go to the wedding. Now remember, Antonio and Maje's brother, Victor, were like friends in college before he began dating Maje, so his other friends were in shock that he wouldn't be going to one of his good friends' wedding. It just made no sense. Antonio eventually told his friends that the real reason he didn't want to go to the wedding is because Maje told him that she cheated on him with a coworker and he had broken up with her. His friends tried convincing him to not ruin his friend's wedding despite this, and in the end convinced him to go. However, during the wedding, Antonio was not really feeling it and was just very quiet. Antonio also confessed to his friends that Maje never really liked them. They learned how she would criticize their lack of formal education, calling them bums, and even speaking badly of their girlfriends. So that was just like the friends' perspective of this. Like again, Maje was telling the police that, you know, Antonio was very hot-headed and just like a little bit crazy, but his friends were like, no, like we have a completely different version of this. Like Maje was the one who was crazy, controlling, and hot-headed, and Antonio was the one who just kept giving this like cheating liar so many second chances. Anyways, Maje was trying to tell police that Antonio may have confronted a thief, but police weren't buying this. The second thing that Maje said that was weird to police was that she and Antonio were having some problems with workers who were renovating their apartment, so maybe they were behind Antonio's murder. Another thing she said was that maybe his death was a result of an affair that he was having with a woman named Beatrice, who worked with Antonio, and perhaps Beatrice's partner found out and wanted revenge. Now, side note, Beatrice did testify during all of this, and she said that this affair never happened, that their relationship was simply professional, so it's most likely that Maje just like lied about this to the police. So yeah, Maje was just saying all of these like ridiculous lies to the police, and everything that she was saying completely contradicted everything that Antonio's friends and family were saying. Antonio's friends even told police that 3 weeks after Antonio's death, they actually saw Maje out clubbing in Alicante. She was posing, taking photos, drinking, and dancing. And they were like, that doesn't seem like something a mourning widow would do. Like, even if it's 3 weeks after his death, like, why would you go to the club and be dancing and like taking shots when your husband was just murdered? Police later learned that the same night that she was seen like clubbing and partying 3 weeks after his death, she actually had a sexual encounter with a Barcelona police officer named Sergio. Sergio said the night they met, Maje told him that she was a gynecologist, and they went to a hotel after meeting and they had sex 3 times in the hotel, including in the bathroom. And this is something that Maje's friend Rocio also spoke about during her questioning. She told police that Maje did have to lie to Antonio in order to go out with friends and dance, and that she liked having sexual relations with young and athletic men. And she told police about one of Maje's lovers, Jose. She didn't reveal to the police all of the lovers that she had. I'm not sure if this friend knew about all of them or if she only knew about Jose. So the police actually did know about Jose when they were questioning Maje, but they were just waiting to see if she would bring it up herself, but she never did. Maje was just giving police a very weird impression, and they ended up intervening her phone calls. They heard Maje on the phone acting all sad, and she appeared to be a mourning widow with some family and some friends. She would tell them that she couldn't eat, that she was so sad that she was in bed all day, and just like things like that. But then on the phone with her best friend Rocio, she was just like completely different. She would show her true colors with her. In one phone call, she told her, quote, "Rocio, there are 3 things that perfectly define us. 1, we're really crazy. 2, we love having fun, especially with good-looking guys. I didn't want that fun with Antonio. May he rest in peace. And that guy," referring to Sergio, the police officer, "is going to me like he did in the bathroom." So police hear this conversation and they're just like, oh my god, it looks like Maje is like almost relieved at Antonio being out of her life. Like, this does not sound like a mourning widow. In a conversation that she had with her friend Rocio after meeting up with Antonio's brother Vicente to discuss her inheritance and all of that, she expressed to Rocio how disappointed she is with what she's getting. Maje ended up with a monthly pension of around 1,100 euros, and she also had a dispute with her in-laws over the money that she had invested in their shared apartment, arguing that she should be getting more, but Antonio's family was like, well, we can't really find any proof that you invested more money than Antonio in this apartment, or just any proof of what she was claiming was owed to her. So she told Rocio on the phone, like, they can rot, but don't worry, I'll make it through, Rocio. Oh my god, I didn't expect this. So just again, seeming very upset at how little money she was getting after Antonio's death. Maje also went on to tell Rocio that she was very happy and grateful that she didn't have to have a baby with Antonio, and is now free to live the life that she wants, although she didn't know with who or what she'd do. She was just happy that now she was free. Police knew Antonio's family and Maje were not on good terms because, again, Maje was like really pushy about Antonio's life insurance policies, about her pensions, and was only reaching out to them about that topic and didn't care that they were literally grieving. Antonio's brother says that Maje was just like so adamant about the money and says that he and his family were mourning the loss of their loved one, yet she had no compassion whatsoever and was just getting so like pushy about getting the paperwork started, and it was just like very heartless. It's not like she was reaching out to them to be like, guys, can we get together and talk about Antonio's death? Like, I need to speak to someone about this, or like kind of just show support to each other. It was her calling the family being like, hey, when are you going to submit the paperwork for Antonio's life insurance? You know, things like that. It was, again, just very odd behavior for someone who just lost her husband. So for police, this just further raised some red flags. After Maje found out about Rocio's testimony, where she told police about her lover, Jose, she went back to the police station to give them a new statement. She told police all about her affair with Jose and said that she didn't want to initially come forward during her first statement out of embarrassment, but she said that she was pushed to have this affair because Antonio was no longer the same man that she married and fell in love with. When police took her lover Jose in for questioning, they quickly realized that he really did have no involvement. He told police that he never knew about Antonio until after he died, which again is when Maje confessed to him that she was married. He told police that Maje used some unusual arguments to explain Antonio's death to him. Maje told him that the police were suspecting that it was in relation to a possible terrorist attack that had just happened, referring to the one that occurred during this time, the Barcelona attack in Las Ramblas, or that a killer had been on a killing spree in their neighborhood since another person was killed shortly before Antonio's death. So yeah, Jose was like, well, yeah, she explained all of these reasons as to why her husband could have been killed, and she also told me that she only married Antonio out of family pressure and that she didn't actually love him. Jose told police he ended up forgiving her for being married this entire time, and that they continued with their relationship and even paid a deposit for an apartment together under Maje's name and even spoke about having a kid together eventually. So after speaking with Jose and hearing his side, police were 100% sure that Jose had nothing to do with Antonio's death and truly didn't know that Maje had been married. However, through Maje's phone, police also learned about the other affairs that she was having, and police knew that one of them could have been the one to murder Antonio. One lover that stuck out to police was Salvador. He was different than the others Maje had. While the others were young and athletic, Salvador was much older than her and just not physically what she normally gravitated towards. Again, he was 47 years old and she was 26. On November 8th, Maje picked up the phone and called Salvador. The moment he answered, she realized the tension in Salvador's voice. He told Maje, quote, "You need to disconnect from everything and even from me because if I see you, I'm just going to remind you of it every day." Maje asked if they could meet in person to speak about this because again, she didn't want to speak about it over the phone, but Salvador just cut her off and blurted out that he called the police. Maje heard him say this and she was just in shock. She shouted asking what he's done, and Salvador explained that he actually didn't call a police, but he called a friend who works for the police, but that he knows about her other lover, Jose, and that he knows of their plans to go to Italy to spend New Year's Eve together, and told her that he's really hurt by this. I mean, he killed Antonio for her, yet she can't even 100% commit to him. So Maje tries calming him down by telling him that Jose is just a friend and that she was going to Italy with more people, not just him, but Salvador doesn't buy it and just tells her to tell him if she's not happy in this relationship. She kind of just ignores this question on the phone call, and Maje could only focus on avoiding getting caught. She again asked Salvador if they can just meet in person to talk this over and to basically just calm him down.
Salva.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Dime.
No estoy bien, necesito que me digas qué ha pasado porque...
Tienes que desconectar de tu casa. En cierta medida también tendrás que desconectar de mí porque yo te lo voy a recordar cada día que me veas. Entonces,
¿Qué va?
me ha dado un bajón bestial. Y el otro día llamé a la policía.
¿Qué dices?
A mi amigo.
Dios,
a mi amigo.
Salva, no hagas locuras, ¿eh?
Hay otra persona ahí, un tal José Antonio. Me han dicho que te vas con él a Italia. Entonces, claro, pues me ha dado un bajón.
O sea, ¿me están investigando a mí?
No sé, si no estamos feliz, dímelo.
Madre mía, pero ¿podemos vernos o no? O sea, que están pinchando mi teléfono y todo.
¿Dónde me quieres a mí en esta historia?
I mean, at this point on the phone call, she is freaking out that Salvador is going to blow the whistle on all of this. Now, again, police are listening to this conversation, which is why we know all of these specific details. So they're listening to this frantic phone call, and they know that they're getting close to a confession or at least to something incriminating. So they make a trap for Maje to fall right into. And coincidentally, Antonio's brother helped them to do so. There were differing reports as to if Vicente had knowledge that he was part of this trap, or if police gave him this information and just kind of sat back and let it unfold on his own. Regardless, on December 28th, 2018, Vicente, Antonio's brother, had gone to the police to ask about his brother's case and if there were any suspects or any leads. There, police told him that they were about to close the case and that they had the killer's full name. So Vicente goes and tells Maje this because, again, this is his brother's wife, the widow. So of course he's going to go update her on the case, and she does exactly what police expected her to. She calls Salvador. She told him that Vicente mentioned someone named Esther, who again is the head of the homicide department, and says that Esther had the name of the person responsible for Antonio's death and that the investigation is close to being closed, but that Esther is waiting for some additional evidence to increase the person's charges. Salvador hears this and tells Maje that he thinks the police are likely looking at someone else because if they were focused on him or coming on to him, he would have known by now, and they haven't even brought him in for questioning. So he was like, "Don't worry, we're fine, police don't know about me." The two agreed to meet in person in fear that their calls are being intervened. Little did they know that police were actively listening to this call, and they decide to meet up at a restaurant to further discuss all of this. Which brings us to January 2nd, 2018. Salvador and Maje met in person on this day, and investigators sat nearby in just regular clothing to record their conversation. During the meeting, they hear how Salvador expresses that the one thing troubling him is the key he used to enter the garage. They further discuss the crime, the murder, and everything surrounding it, focusing on how to avoid getting caught, and Salvador tells Maje that they need to be 100% on the same page if anyone asks about the key. They end up agreeing to say that Salvador stole the key from Maje's purse. I mean, again, Salvador was just so in love with Maje that he was willing to take the fall for this. So he was like, "Yeah, of course, I'll say that I stole the key and that I did everything and that you weren't involved. Don't worry, I got your back." Police hear all of this and immediately knew that Salvador was a killer. They had their man now, and on January 10th, 2018, Maje and Salvador were arrested. Salvador was actually in the cafeteria in the hospital he worked at visiting his mom who was sick. When he was getting some coffee in the cafeteria, he was arrested, and the backpack that he had brought with him still was in his mom's hospital room. Inside the backpack, there were love letters between him and Maje, and Salvador's wife is actually the one who found the backpack and found the letters, and she actually turned it into the police. Once arrested, Salvador confessed to Antonio's murder and said that Maje had absolutely nothing to do with it. He told police that Antonio was toxic to Maje and that he couldn't bear the thought of anyone hurting her, and he couldn't just sit back and do nothing while she was suffering because he just loved her so much. He told police where the murder weapon was and his bloody clothes as well. When police went to go find it, they had to dig for nearly 3 hours to find it. They used a tool with like magnets and like a hook to pull out the knife, which was inside a plastic bag deep in the septic tank. Now, Salvador says that the only reason he had the keys to the parking garage was because Maje had previously given them to him for the days that he would go have lunch at her house when Antonio wasn't home, since parking in the street was always very hard in that neighborhood. So he's like, yeah, one time Maje gave me the keys so I could go park in there, and then I just kept them. As for Maje, she told police that her and Salvador were only friends and that she never had any true romantic interest in him. She even said, quote, I have had a sexual relationship with him, but very sporadically and only oral sex because I am not physically attracted to him. She said that she did express to Salvador that she was not happy in her marriage, but that she never even asked him to kill him or do anything like that. She said she had nothing to do with Antonio's murder. During their detention before their trial took place, they both tried to make it seem through letters, which they knew were being monitored by the police, that the only person responsible for the crime was Salvador. So their plan was to deceive the police through these letters, to lie to the judge, lie to the jury, lie to the police, lie during the trial, and again, just make it seem like Salvador did all of this and Maje was innocent. Salvador honestly thought that they were on the same page, that, he loved her so much and he was just protecting her and that she basically saw him as her hero. However, as time went by awaiting the trial, Maje grew more and more distant from Salvador. She was no longer responding to his letters, no longer accepting visits from him, and what really ended things between them was the fact that Salvador learned that Maje was already being intimate with inmates from the male ward. It was all over the news. Like, I guess the prisons over there are like co-ed and there's like co-ed moments. So of course everyone in the news was like, oh my gosh, Maje is like already sleeping with men in prison, and Salvador got word of it. This made him angry. He felt betrayed. He thought that by killing her husband, he would have Maje all to himself, but here she was already having sex with other men in prison, and Salvador just burst. He decided to confess the truth, that Maje was the one who asked him to do this. He was confessing the truth not only because of how betrayed he felt, but also because his daughter was pressuring him to tell the truth and not take the fall all by himself for something that both he and Maje did. So Salvador asked to see a judge before the trial began and confessed on November 9th, 2018. He said that he felt so guilty for what he did and that the guilt was honestly eating him away. He just couldn't carry it anymore. He had nightmares of the day that he killed Antonio and was so stressed about it and just felt so relieved to finally tell the truth. The trial began, and during it, Salvador's defense argued that both he and Maje planned Antonio's death and that Maje absolutely was involved, since she told Salvador the exact time Antonio would be entering the garage, told him the make and model of his car, the parking space that the car was parked in, and literally gave him the keys to enter the parking garage, and again was even the one who suggested that he use a knife since it would be silent. The defense was saying that she was 100% aware of Salvador's intentions of ending Antonio's life, that she didn't do anything to stop him, that Salvador was a victim of Maje's manipulation. They explained how Salvador went out of his way to always help her, doing things like grocery shopping for her, washing her car, and buying her gifts, and how Maje confided in him, telling him that she was being mistreated and manipulated by Antonio, knowing that he would take action after hearing that, which is what caused him to do what he did. He was scared for Maje's life and scared of losing her. After all, he said Maje told him that as long as Antonio was alive, they could never be together. As for Maje's defense, they were arguing that this was only Salvador's idea. They said that when Maje told Salvador that she wanted to divorce Antonio, he told her that wasn't going to solve her problems and that would only make Antonio more crazy, since again he thought that Antonio was toxic. This is when he suggested that a good solution would be to end Antonio's life instead. Maje's defense argued Salvador saw an opportunity to have Maje all to himself, but Maje never took any of Salvador's words seriously. She didn't believe that he was actually capable of hurting Antonio and killing him. She said that the day Salvador killed Antonio, she broke down crying when he told her what he did. She said that Salvador told her that he had a fight with Antonio in the parking garage after he spoke badly of her, and in response, he stabbed him. Again, Maje was saying that she had no knowledge of any plan, of any knife, or of any stabbing. So the prosecution was like, okay, if this was Salvador's plan, why didn't you just tell the police this? Why didn't you just tell them, like, hey, Salvador is the one that did all of this, like, I'm innocent, like, I had nothing to do with this? And her explanation for this is that she really feared Salvador, that she was scared of him and scared of what he might do to her if she revealed the truth, so that's why she decided to say nothing. However, the prosecution played audios from her and Salvador's intervened phone calls that said otherwise. In these calls, she didn't appear scared of Salvador. She'd tell him things like, you're the only one who can make me blush like this, or that she was constantly thinking of him and that she loves him, and even had a conversation about a sexual encounter with him that left her in, quote, shock. So the prosecution was like, oh, you're saying you're scared of Salvador, yet these conversations say otherwise. It sounds like you actually like him, that you're having sex with him, so this doesn't make sense. The prosecution said psychiatric exams showed neither Salvador nor Maje had any mental problems and were both completely aware and in the right state of mind during all of this. The exams showed Salvador was very dependent on Maje, and as for Maje, the exams showed that she was just like very organized, which allowed her to carry on with all of these lovers at the same time, and again allowed her to manipulate all of these lovers, friends, and co-workers with so many lies, that she used sex as an infallible weapon to get whatever she wanted. Maje's defense argued that she was being judged for her supposedly rebellious life in her extramarital affairs, and that this wasn't fair, that just because she had affairs and did all of this didn't mean that she wanted her husband dead.
Y usted no le dijo a Salvador en ningún caso que le mataran.
Jamás, nunca.
¿Pudo él entender que usted sí quisiera...
No,
quería
nunca
esa
hablamos de eso de Antonio, hablaba de mis problemas con él, de mi matrimonio, pero yo nunca he pedido que haga eso, nunca.
¿Usted sí que diría que por esa época él estaba dispuesto a todo por usted o no?
Pero no a matar, es que ¿quién
No.
piensa eso?
¿A qué estaba él entonces?
Salva,
Sí.
pues a estar conmigo, compañeros de vida, a compartir el día a día.
Now, despite the defense's efforts, both Salvador and Maje were convicted on October 30th, 2020. Maje was sentenced to 22 years in prison and Salvador received 17 years. The reason for the difference in years was because Salvador confessed and was cooperative with the police. Both of them were ordered to pay Antonio's family a total of 250,000 euros, 100,000 euros for both Antonio's mom and dad, and then 50,000 euros for his brother, and they also must cover half of the legal costs, including those of the private prosecution. Before sentencing, Maje said, quote, "First of all, again, I offer my regret and apologies to Antonio's family, and above all, for my selfishness and cowardice in not going to the police when Salvador told me what he had done. I can't forgive myself for that. I was very cowardly, selfish, and only thought about myself and the consequences it could bring me. I'm very sorry." So she was still standing by her story that she had no idea that Salvador was going to do this and that she didn't plan this.
Ante todo, de nuevo mi arrepentimiento y perdón hacia la familia de Antonio. Y sobre todo, mi egoísmo y cobardía a la hora de no acudir a la policía cuando Salvador me contó lo que había hecho. Eso no me lo podré perdonar, pero fui muy cobarde, egoísta, y solo pensé en mí, en las consecuencias que me podría acarrear todo eso. Lo siento mucho.
As for Salvador, he didn't really say much. He just kind of gave his apologies and his condolences. Maje and Salvador's relationship was basically non-existent after this. He did try writing love letters to her, but Maje never answered. In prison, Maje began having sexual relations during conjugal visits with male inmates that she would meet during their co-ed social time. One inmate who she was having relations with was a man who was actually in prison for essaying a child. So she was caught having sexual relations relations with this disgusting man in a pool. So apparently in the prison that she's at, there's like a pool, there's a theater, a sports area, and stuff like that. So the prison has a lot of co-ed time for things like cultural events, church, etc. So that's how she was meeting these men during the co-ed time and was having sex with them in the pool. Of course, news of her getting caught having relations with a man arrested for essaying a child was all over the media. It was just absolutely appalling. Like, what are you doing? Her name was in the media even more after Maje got pregnant in prison. Yes, this lady got pregnant. It's crazy. So she ended up getting pregnant by a man named David, who was in prison since 2008 when he was 22 years old. He was actually sent to prison for murdering a young man named Hugo Saez in a drug-related altercation and for hiding his body. In July of 2023, Maje gave birth to a baby boy that she named David after the baby's father. But apparently Maje and the baby's father's relationship ended, and he didn't accept or approve any visitation to witness his son's birth. During her pregnancy, Maje was transferred to a maternity ward of the prison, and her baby would be allowed to live with her until they turned 3 years old. After that, they would need to live with a relative who could be their guardian until Maje is released from prison, which that family member could be the father, David himself, because at the time of his son's birth, he was actually just a couple of months away from finishing his 15-year sentence. But I mean, who knows, since he did deny any approved visitation to see him when he was born and didn't really want to be a part of the baby's life, I doubt that David is going to take care of the baby. Now, a few months after the birth of Maje's child, her mother actually appeared on a TV show called Vamos a Ver. And she said that she and the family were just devastated by all of this. She was worried about her daughter having a child in prison and just said that she wouldn't wish that upon anyone. She explained how she visits her daughter every single week and how this baby is her first grandchild and she's going to love this baby no matter what circumstances he was born into. She also reiterated how she believes Maje is innocent, saying that Maje's biggest mistake was simply staying silent, that she should have turned Salvador in. That was the only thing she did wrong. She added that her daughter should have left Antonio if she wasn't happy and that no one should ever die the way Antonio did. She said that she is really worried for her grandchild's future, but is at ease knowing that the prison conditions for mothers is much better, which is something people think may have been Maje's only motive for getting pregnant. If she got pregnant, she would move to the maternity ward, which just had better conditions and the possibility of better benefits that she wouldn't have the chance to get. Now, regardless of her getting pregnant in prison and just all of this, I really hope that the baby's okay. I hope that the baby doesn't suffer and that he gets to live a normal life. We will see what happens with Maje and Salvador and if any more news from their life in prison is released. I mean, just the fact that she's just still having sex with men in prison and even got pregnant is just wild. Antonio's death has been shared on so many different documentaries and TV shows because of how tragic it is. And of course, how heartless Maje is. Antonio's case has been covered in 2 episodes of a show aired in 2021 on the Valencian regional channel Apunt. In December of 2024, Netflix actually announced plans to turn Antonio's case into a movie or into a mini-series, but no release date has been revealed yet. Knowing that Antonio had a full life ahead of him with so much to offer the world just breaks my heart. And how he was so loved by all of his friends and family, it's really, really sad. It's just so unfair how Maje thought that she could just use him and get all of his money. She's just so incredibly selfish. I mean, she was just horrible from the beginning, just cheating on him and just always betraying his trust, and he just always kept giving her a second chance. And for her to just turn and decide to murder him in this way and have him stabbed 6 times, it's just terrible. And I don't know, it just makes me really sad looking at the photos of him because he seemed just genuinely a very just happy and lively person. It's also really sad for Salvador's now ex-wife and daughter. They had to come to terms with the fact that someone they loved and trusted was capable of such cruelty. I mean, imagine finding out that your dad killed the husband of his mistress in such a brutal way. It was just a very painful and emotional betrayal for a lot of people. As for Maje's own family, I mean, we heard how the mom has believed her innocence, but what about her other family members? What do all her siblings think about this? I just can't imagine finding out my sibling is this complete crazy person. With that, that is everything I have for today's video. I know it was a tough one and it's just really frustrating and it just makes you so angry. I'm just still upset talking about this because I'm just what is your problem, girl? How are you so just Oh my God. I can't even get into it, but I would love to know what you guys think about this case down below. I appreciate you all so much for being here and for taking the time to listen to what happened to Antonio and for remembering his life. I appreciate you all so much. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below so you guys can join the familia. I also recommend that you guys turn on your notifications so you don't miss any future videos. I love seeing you guys here every single week, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, familia.